Have you ever wondered why your depth unsettles people? Why the more you think, the less you seem to fit in? Why your silence, your questions, and your refusal to conform to shallow expectations often make others, especially women, distance themselves, misinterpret you, or even criticize you? Søren Kierkegaard once observed that people demand freedom of speech as a substitute for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. But you think. And that's precisely where the trouble begins. You're not threatening because you are aggressive. You are threatening because you are not predictable. In a world that equates predictability with safety, a man who dares to think deeply is dangerous by default. His very presence challenges the foundations of a society built on convenience, not truth. Modern relationships, too, are often constructed on emotional comfort rather than honest connection. But a lucid man is allergic to illusions. He rips off the masks, asks the questions no one wants to face, and sees the dissonance in people's eyes between what they say and what they actually feel. Kierkegaard warned us, the crowd is untruth. When a man chooses not to dissolve into the crowd but to carve out a path of his own, one grounded in meaning, solitude, and reflection, he dismantles the very architecture that keeps people emotionally obedient and numb. Women don't fear an intelligent man because of his intellect. They fear him because they cannot control him. He doesn't need praise to feel valuable, nor validation to feel masculine. He doesn't become a puppet just to be chosen. He chases, yes, but only when he knows the chase isn't a performance dressed up as love. And when he loves, he does so with a clarity that can be overwhelming, not for comfort, but for truth. His presence is sharp, aware, existentially honest, and in a world that thrives on masks, such presence is rare. And what is rare is usually rejected before it is ever respected. Kierkegaard also wrote at length about despair. Not as we commonly understand it, but as a silent, deadly illness, to be disconnected from oneself without even realizing it. That is the true fear of modern culture, that the man awakens from the social theater, that he stops being charming and starts being conscious, because a conscious man cannot be seduced, not by applause, not by emotional chaos. A man like that stops performing for approval, and when he no longer needs approval, he becomes free. And when he becomes free, he becomes dangerous. Ask yourself, why do you feel misunderstood in most rooms you enter? Why does your silence seem to unnerve others? We live in a time where most people build their identity through being seen, while the intelligent man builds his through seeing, and seeing deeply unsettles those who hide behind facades. Kierkegaard said that life must be understood backward but lived forward, and so the lucid man walks forward, but with eyes wide open. He dissects structures, questions power, studies emotion, fear, seduction. What happens when a man is no longer seduced by the superficial? He becomes unplayable, not because he is cold, but because he is whole. That kind of integrity disrupts the emotional economy of modern relationships, where confusion is often mistaken for passion. Kierkegaard knew this. He walked away from the only woman he truly loved, not because he didn't feel, but because he felt too much. He understood that living authentically meant rejecting imposed roles even if it tore him apart. So hear this clearly. The more conscious you become, the more alone you will feel. That's not failure, it's the cost of awakening. You don't scare people because you're harsh. You scare them because you're untamed. And a man who cannot be conditioned cannot be controlled. That's the real threat to any system built on manipulation, including many modern relationships. Most people aren't looking for love, they're looking for utility. They want a provider, protector, performer, but the conscious man refuses that mold. And in doing so, he becomes invisible to those still trapped within it. Kierkegaard called this the leap of faith, to abandon the safety of roles, systems, and expectations, and walk alone. To love truth more than comfort. To choose honest despair over fake happiness. That leap will cost you everything, but it will also wake you up. And once you truly see, you cannot unsee. If your intelligence is rooted in awareness rather than in information, you'll stop seeking validation and start seeking meaning, God, peace, purpose. That terrifies others. Sometimes it terrifies even you. Because what lies beyond that leap is not for the faint-hearted. Kierkegaard once said, "To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself." Many men have already lost themselves, not from a lack of intelligence, but because they've been taught to apologize for it. They've been trained to soften their voice, hide their vision, laugh at what is fake, remain silent at what is wrong, and be pleasant to be accepted. But acceptance that demands the death of your essence is not acceptance, it's assimilation. And the man who refuses to assimilate becomes a threat, not just to women, but to anyone who profits from his silence. You don't scare them because you're cruel, you scare them because you're precise. Because for him, love is not a game, not a power struggle, not a playground for unresolved wounds. For him, love is truth, and truth isn't always pleasant, but it's always real. That's why you meet resistance. That's why your presence provokes confusion, even hostility, because you threaten a system built on performance. You don't beg, you don't chase, you don't repeat yourself 10 times just to be understood. You walk away, not from anger, but because your soul is not for sale. And that kind of man, calm, centered, sovereign, is more feared than any tyrant. Because he doesn't react, he chooses. And to choose with authenticity is the final rebellion left in this world. So, do you really want to know why intelligent men unsettle modern women? Because they cannot be owned. They can only be met. Not because people are shallow and not because they are cruel, but because we live in a culture that rewards performance over presence. In a world addicted to appearances, the lucid man finds it impossible to pretend. He cannot simulate connection. He must give himself entirely or not at all. And most people are not ready for that kind of totality. It's raw, unfiltered, and demands a level of awareness that few are willing to confront. Men and women alike often prefer the comfort of ignorance over the discomfort of self-confrontation. Søren Kierkegaard's life stands as a testament to this truth. He loved Regina Olsen deeply, not superficially, but chose to walk away, not due to a lack of love, but because the magnitude of his inner world was too immense to be shared casually. He understood that his path would be solitary, that his depths would not fit within the conventional frame of companionship. This is the paradox of the intelligent man. He yearns for intimacy, but not at the expense of his integrity. He seeks connection but refuses to perform for it. He would rather walk alone than dilute his essence for the sake of being desired. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment, and it terrifies people. Deep down, everyone wants to be chosen, but the intelligent man wants to be found. For that to happen, the other must also be whole, must have walked through their own fire, unlearned their own illusions. And the truth is, most are not ready for that. That's why they call you distant, cold, or difficult. But you're not cold, you're clear. You don't hate women, you just refuse to worship illusions. You don't hate love, you simply won't mistake it for dependency. You've seen too much to pretend to be blind, and that is what truly unsettles them. They can't manipulate you. They can't predict you. You're not waiting for someone to tell you who you are. Kierkegaard once said, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." If you've read this far, it's likely because you're not like the rest. You want to know who you are beyond the noise, beyond the roles, beyond the masks. The need for approval is one of the subtlest prisons a man can live in. And escaping that prison isn't free. It costs you popularity, comfort, sometimes even love. But what you gain is far greater. Identity, sovereignty, and sanity. When you no longer feel incomplete, you stop looking for someone to complete you. And at that point, you become dangerous, not to people, but to a system built on the brokenness of men. The deeper you go, the clearer everything becomes, and the lies about masculinity begin to fall apart. Kierkegaard didn't care for success by worldly standards. He warned of the danger of losing oneself quietly, without even realizing it. And that's exactly what has happened to countless men. Spiritually disappeared, dissolved in their attempts to please, to conform, to be charming. Until one day they look in the mirror and can no longer recognize the man staring back. But the intelligent man cannot fake it forever. The internal tension builds. He begins to notice that what others call confidence is often arrogance, what they call love is usually dependency, and what they call chemistry is often just trauma in disguise. And once he starts seeing the truth, he starts to suffer. Because awareness brings discomfort. He no longer fits in. His questions irritate. His clarity unsettles. His search for truth repels those who live in permanent performance. The world punishes this type of man. Because a man who cannot be seduced by the crowd becomes a mirror to those still trapped within it. In relationships, this man is not distant out of indifference, but out of discernment. He doesn't chase. He observes. He doesn't flatter. He listens. He doesn't react impulsively. He chooses his words with precision. This makes him mysterious, and that mystery frightens those who crave constant validation. He is not absent. He is present, but with intention. And that presence, when not handed out freely, feels like rejection to those accustomed to being adored effortlessly. He does not idolize, he discerns. Because intelligence, when paired with emotional clarity, becomes a form of spiritual vision. He sees beyond appearances. He reads behind fake smiles. He detects manipulation. He exposes the shallow. And this vision unnerves those still hiding behind their roles. Kierkegaard insisted on the importance of becoming a real individual, not a role, not a performer, not a reflection of others' expectations, but a true self. And to reach that self, one must embrace silence, solitude, reflection, stillness. 4 qualities our modern culture rejects. Because a man who spends too much time in silence might stop consuming, stop conforming, stop apologizing for who he is. And most threatening of all, he might stop chasing things that were never worthy of him to begin with. Want to disturb a room? Enter without seeking attention. Observe. Speak with precision. Set boundaries without raising your voice. Be kind without being submissive. Love without clinging. Watch how others begin to recalibrate around your presence, because deep down everyone recognizes when a man is rooted in himself. And that unsettles people, especially when you're not performing to win their favor. The intelligent man defies labels. Is he cold? No, he is calm. Is he arrogant? No, he respects himself. Is he distant? No, he's selective. But because labels are easier than introspection, the world will reduce him to anything that makes his clarity seem less threatening. Don't let that shake you. Let it sharpen you. Let it deepen your solitude and fortify your path. You were not born to please, to beg, or to be someone's comfort zone. You were made to become a man in the truest, deepest sense, conscious, grounded in truth, willing to walk alone if that's what it takes to keep your soul intact. Today's culture celebrates noise, worships distraction, and rewards conformity. But the more intelligent you become, the fewer applauses you'll hear. Because you've stopped playing for the crowd. You're walking with your soul now, and most people don't applaud that. They back away. They get uncomfortable. They shrink. Not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. In a world built on constant stimulation, your stillness feels like rebellion, and it is. It's the quiet revolution of a man who has reclaimed his mind, his heart, and his attention. He owes no one an explanation, and certainly not a reaction. The intelligent man doesn't justify himself to those committed to misunderstanding him. He's learned to guard his thoughts, to speak only when it matters, and to remain silent when it doesn't. And when he loves, he doesn't seek possession. He doesn't aim to impress. He wants to see. And that kind of vision pierces through ego, vanity, and masks. It demands presence. It demands truth. And truth is fire. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't bargain. It simply is. When a man is anchored in that truth, he becomes unshakable, not because he is hard, but because he is whole. That's why they avoid you, misunderstand you, even demonize you, because you stopped chasing shadows. And when someone stops chasing shadows, those who live in them feel exposed. Your presence becomes a judgment, your silence, a mirror that doesn't flatter. But your mission is not to please. It is to reflect what is real, first within yourself, then in the world. So walk on, even if alone. Walk with clarity, with purpose, with the quiet knowing that you are not made to live on the surface. You are made to dive deep, to burn, to embody a truth that the world cannot domesticate. And when the right woman comes, the one capable of seeing this, it won't be because you conquered her, but because in your silence, she remembered something she had long forgotten within herself.